The unbreakable fleet. The Vorthak Empire had carved their name across the galaxy in blood and fire. For 800 years, their crimson battle cruisers had swept through star system after star system, leaving nothing but conquest in their wake. No species had ever defeated them in open battle. No world had ever successfully resisted their advance. They were the apex predators of space, and they knew it. Admiral Zekthu stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, watching another human world burn below. The planet Kepler 442 bits had been home to 3 million human colonists just 12 hours ago. Now it was a smoldering wasteland, its cities reduced to glass and ash by Vorthak plasma bombardment. Another species learns the price of resistance, Zekthu said to his second-in-command, war leader Vexnil. His voice carried the cold satisfaction of absolute superiority that came from 8 centuries of unbroken victory. Vexnil nodded, his reptilian features showing predatory satisfaction. The humans lasted longer than most, Admiral. Their ships fought for 9 hours before complete annihilation. Most species surrender after 3. Foolish courage, Zekthu replied, watching the last human orbital platforms explode in brilliant flashes. It changes nothing. Mark this system as conquered. Deploy the harvester fleets. On the surface of the dying world, the few surviving humans huddled in underground shelters, listening to the thunder of alien bombardment above. Among them was Dr. Marcus Webb, formerly the colony's chief research scientist, now just another refugee clutching his research tablet like a lifeline. The shelter shook with another impact, and emergency lights flickered. Around him, families held each other close, their faces etched with the hopeless despair of the defeated. Webb closed his eyes and tried to process what he had seen in the battle above. Human weapons had barely scratched the Vorthak shields. Human tactics had been anticipated and countered at every turn. 800 years of galactic conquest had taught the Vorthak how to defeat any conventional military force. The word conventional stuck in Webb's mind. In his research tablet were the classified files he had been working on before the attack. Project Prometheus, humanity's most experimental and dangerous military research program. It had been deemed too risky, too unpredictable to deploy. But now, with humanity facing extinction, perhaps it was time to take that risk. 3 months earlier, Captain Elena Rodriguez had been given command of humanity's most unusual warship. The Prometheus didn't look like other human vessels. Where traditional battleships were angular and heavily armored, the Prometheus was sleek and organic-looking. Its hull embedded with experimental quantum processors that gave it an almost living appearance. Rodriguez was 45 years old, a veteran of the border wars who had earned her rank through skill and determination, rather than political connections. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray from the stress of constant warfare, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made her one of humanity's finest tactical minds. Captain, her tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park, called from her station. We're receiving priority transmission from Fleet Command. Admiral Kane wants to speak with you immediately. Rodriguez nodded and activated the secure communication channel. Admiral Thomas Kane's weathered face appeared on the main screen, and she could see the strain of defeat in his eyes. Captain Rodriguez, Kane began without preamble. The Vorthak have broken through our defensive lines at Kepler 442 bits. We've lost 37 ships in the past week, including 2 dreadnoughts. At this rate, we'll be unable to defend the core worlds within 6 months. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of humanity's desperate situation settle on her shoulders. What are your orders, Admiral? Kane paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with reluctance. I'm authorizing the activation of Protocol 7. Project Prometheus is now operational. The bridge fell silent. Every officer knew what Protocol 7 meant. It was humanity's last resort, the deployment of experimental technology so dangerous that using it might destroy their own ship. Rodriguez had hoped this day would never come. Admiral, she said carefully, The quantum phase generators have never been tested in actual combat. We don't know what effects prolonged exposure to dimensional variance might have on the crew. Captain, Kane replied grimly, if we don't try something different, there won't be a crew left to worry about. The Vorthak are 3 days away from the Centauri system. If they take that, the road to Earth is wide open. Rodriguez looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were young, most of them barely out of the academy. They had signed up to defend humanity, but none of them had expected to become test subjects for technology that might kill them faster than enemy fire. Dr. Webb, she called to her chief science officer, what's the status of the quantum generators? Dr. Marcus Webb, a different Dr. Webb than the one trapped on the dying colony, but a colleague who had worked on the same research, looked up from his console with a mixture of excitement and terror. All systems are showing green, Captain. Theoretical models suggest we can achieve stable dimensional phase variance for up to 20 minutes at a time. Theoretical models, Rodriguez repeated. And in practice? Webb swallowed hard. In practice, Captain, we might accidentally shift ourselves into a dimension where the laws of physics work differently. Or we might scatter our atoms across 17 different realities. Or we might open a portal that lets something very unfriendly into our universe. Rodriguez almost smiled at his honesty. Those are certainly cheerful possibilities, Doctor. The proximity alarms suddenly activated, and Lieutenant Park's voice cut through the tension. Captain, we're detecting multiple Vorthak signatures dropping out of hyperspace. 15 heavy cruisers, approaching fast. Rodriguez moved to the captain's chair and strapped herself in. All hands, prepare for combat. Dr. Webb, bring the quantum generators online. It's time to see if human ingenuity can beat 800 years of Vorthak superiority. The Prometheus was alone against 15 enemy warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than any human vessel ever built. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a massacre. But these were not normal circumstances. Quantum phase generators are online, Webb reported, his voice tight with concentration. Dimensional variance field is stable at 96% efficiency. Vorthak ships are powering weapons, Park announced. They're beginning to spread into attack formation. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Vorthak were confident, almost casual in their approach. Why wouldn't they be? They had never lost a battle. They had no reason to expect this one to be different. Activate phase variance on my mark, Rodriguez ordered. All weapons systems, prepare for engagement pattern Delta 7. On the bridge of the Crimson Talon, Admiral Zek Thu watched the lone human ship with mild curiosity. It was smaller than their usual battleships, and it wasn't following any recognized human tactical doctrine. Instead of trying to run or sending surrender signals, it was actually approaching his fleet. War leader Vexnil, he commanded, dispatch 3 cruisers to eliminate the human vessel. Make it quick. I want to begin the bombardment of their next colony within the hour. At once, Admiral, Vexnil replied, already transmitting the orders. 3 Vorthak cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the Prometheus. Their dark red hulls bristled with plasma cannons and missile launchers, enough firepower to reduce a city to rubble. Against any normal human ship, the battle would have been over in seconds. But the Prometheus was not a normal human ship. Mark, Rodriguez said quietly. The universe twisted. Reality bent and warped around the Prometheus as the quantum generators reached full power. The ship began to flicker in and out of normal spacetime, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. To the Vorthak sensors, it appeared as a ghost, a shadow that couldn't be properly targeted or tracked. The lead Vorthak cruiser fired its main plasma cannon, a beam of superheated matter that could melt through 3 meters of battleship armor. The beam passed harmlessly through the Prometheus as if the ship were made of light and dreams. Phase variance holding steady, Webb reported, his voice filled with wonder and terror. We're existing in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously. Their weapons can't lock onto us because we're not entirely here. Rodriguez felt a savage satisfaction as she watched the confusion spread through the Vorthak formation. For 800 years, they had relied on superior firepower and proven tactics. Now they were facing something completely outside their experience. "Begin attack run," she ordered. "Target their shield generators first." The Prometheus solidified just long enough to fire a single, impossibly precise shot. Instead of the crude kinetic projectiles or basic energy beams that the Vorthak expected from human ships, this weapon seemed to bend space itself around the target. The blast struck the lead cruiser's shield generator with surgical precision, overloading it in a cascade of blue fire. Before the Vorthak could react, the Prometheus phased out again, slipping through their formation like a shark through a school of fish. Each time it appeared, another crucial system on a Vorthak ship failed, not destroyed in the traditional sense, but simply ceasing to function as the quantum phase technology interfered with their advanced electronics in ways their engineers had never encountered. Admiral Zekthu watched in growing disbelief as his 3 cruisers drifted helplessly, their crews struggling with system failures they couldn't understand. In 800 years of conquest, the Vorthak had never encountered technology that could simply ignore their weapons and shields. "What is that ship?" he demanded, his usual confidence cracking for the first time in decades. "How are they doing this?" War Leader Vexnil studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. "Admiral, our weapons cannot achieve target lock on the vessel. It appears to be shifting between dimensional phases. Our technology has no defense against such tactics." "Impossible," Zekthu snarled. "The humans are primitives. They cannot possess technology superior to ours." But the evidence was right in front of him. One small human ship had neutralized 3 of his cruisers without taking a single hit. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zekthu felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of fierce pride. They had done it. They had actually hurt the Vorthak. But she knew this was only the beginning. "Dr. Webb," she called, "how long can we maintain phase variance?" "Approximately 15 more minutes at current power levels," Webb replied. "After that, we'll need to shut down for at least an hour to prevent quantum cascade failure." 15 minutes. Rodriguez looked at the tactical display, where 12 Vorthak cruisers were now converging on their position with obvious caution. 15 minutes to prove that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. "All hands," she announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. Today we make history. Today we show the galaxy that humans do not surrender. Today we fight." The Prometheus flickered out of normal spacetime once more, becoming a ghost ship sailing between realities. But as it prepared for the battle of its existence, something unexpected happened. Deep in the quantum generators, exotic particles began to resonate in ways that Dr. Webb's theoretical models had never predicted. Reality was about to become much more complicated. The quantum gambit. The universe had 17 different ways of existing, and Captain Elena Rodriguez was currently experiencing all of them at once. The quantum phase generators had pushed the Prometheus beyond the boundaries of normal spacetime, and Rodriguez could feel the dimensional variance affecting every molecule of her body. Colors that had no names flickered at the edges of her vision. Sounds echoed from realities where different laws of physics applied. Her crew moved like ghosts through corridors that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Captain," Dr. Webb called from his science station, his voice carrying harmonics from several parallel universes. "The quantum field is stabilizing, but not in any way our models predicted. We're not just phasing between dimensions, we're creating new ones." Rodriguez gripped her command chair as another wave of dimensional distortion washed over the bridge. Through the main view screen, she could see the Vorthak fleet approaching, but they looked wrong somehow. Stretched and compressed at the same time, as if reality couldn't decide which version of them was real. "Explain it in terms a simple ship captain can understand, Doctor," she said, fighting back the nausea that came from existing in 17 places at once. Webb's fingers danced over controls that responded to thoughts as much as physical touch. The quantum generators aren't just moving us between existing dimensions, Captain. They're creating pocket universes where the rules of physics are flexible. We can choose which laws apply to us at any given moment. Lieutenant Sarah Park looked up from her tactical station, her eyes wide with possibilities. Captain, if we can control local physics, we could potentially alter the fundamental constants that govern energy and matter. We could make their weapons harmless while making ours infinitely more powerful. The implications hit Rodriguez like a thunderbolt. They weren't just fighting the Vorthek anymore. They were rewriting the very nature of reality itself. It was the ultimate expression of human ingenuity. When faced with insurmountable odds, don't just find a way around them. Change the rules entirely. On the bridge of the Crimson Talon, Admiral Zekthu was experiencing his first taste of genuine fear. The human ship had vanished from all sensors, but he could still feel its presence somehow, a wrongness in space-time that made his scales itch and his secondary hearts skip beats. War Leader Vexnil, he commanded, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. Status report on our damaged cruisers. Vexnil's report was grim. 3 vessels are completely disabled, Admiral. Their crews report that fundamental systems are simply ceasing to function. Not damaged, not destroyed, but operating according to laws of physics that our engineers don't recognize. Zekthu studied the tactical display where the remaining 9 cruisers had formed a defensive sphere, their weapons trained on empty space. In 800 years of conquest, the Vorthak had developed responses to every form of resistance they had encountered. But this was beyond resistance. This was evolution in real time. Admiral, his chief science officer reported, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout this sector. Space-time itself appears to be unstable. Before Zekthu could respond, the Prometheus materialized directly in the center of his defensive formation. But it wasn't the same ship that had disappeared. The hull now seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, and energy patterns that violated several fundamental laws of physics danced across its surface. Captain Rodriguez felt the dimensional shift complete itself as the Prometheus returned to normal space. But normal was a relative term now. The ship existed in a pocket of reality where human will and imagination could override the cold mathematics of the universe. All weapons systems, prepare for full engagement, she ordered. Dr. Webb, I want you to make their shields useless and their weapons harmless. Lieutenant Park, target their command ships first. Aye, Captain, Park replied, her tactical systems now responding to theoretical possibilities rather than mere engineering, locking onto all 9 remaining cruisers simultaneously. What happened next would be remembered in the annals of galactic history as the moment when humanity announced its presence as a major power. The Prometheus fired not weapons in the traditional sense, but controlled distortions in reality itself. Each shot rewrote the local laws of physics around its target, turning energy into matter, matter into energy, and logic into imagination. Vorthek plasma cannons fired beams of superheated gas that instantly cooled to harmless light when they encountered the reality distortion field around the Prometheus. Their shields, designed to deflect physical and energy attacks, had no defense against weapons that attacked the very concept of defense itself. One by one, the mighty Vorthek cruisers simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, but existing in localized pockets of reality where the idea of functioning warships was temporarily suspended. Their crews found themselves breathing vacuum that had been convinced to act like atmosphere, walking on floors that existed in 17 different gravitational orientations, trying to operate controls that followed the emotional logic of dreams rather than the cold precision of engineering. Admiral Zekthu watched his fleet become transformed into an abstract art installation and finally understood what humanity truly was. They weren't just another species to be conquered. They were the universe's way of asking, what if the impossible was possible? All ships, he transmitted on the fleet communication channel, his voice carrying 8 centuries of imperial authority, withdraw to minimum safe distance. Do not engage the human vessel under any circumstances. It was the first retreat order ever given by a Vorthak admiral. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Rodriguez felt the dimensional effects beginning to stabilize. The crew was adapting to their new reality with the flexibility that had always been humanity's greatest strength. Dr. Webb was cataloging new laws of physics like a child collecting seashells. Lieutenant Park was designing tactical scenarios that incorporated controlled violations of causality. Captain, her communications officer announced, "We're receiving transmissions from the Vorthak flagship. They're requesting terms for discussion." Rodriguez smiled. Discussion. Not surrender, not ultimatum, but discussion. It was more than any human commander had achieved against the Vorthak in 2 years of warfare. "Open a channel," she ordered. Admiral Zekthu's reptilian features appeared on the main screen, and Rodriguez could see the profound respect in his eyes, the look of a predator recognizing an apex predator. "Captain Rodriguez," he began, his translator giving his words formal dignity, "I am Admiral Zekthu of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet. In 800 years of conquest, no species has ever defeated us in open battle. And you haven't been defeated now," Rodriguez replied diplomatically. "Your ships are intact, your crews are unharmed. We've simply demonstrated that there are possibilities you hadn't considered." Zekthu's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. "Captain, you have rewritten the fundamental laws of reality to make our weapons ineffective and our tactics meaningless. If that is not defeat, it is something far more impressive." Through the quantum-enhanced communication channel, Rodriguez could sense the genuine curiosity behind the Admiral's words. The Vorthak were conquerors, but they were also explorers. They had spent 8 centuries cataloging the galaxy's military possibilities, and humanity had just shown them an entirely new category. "What do you propose, Admiral?" she asked. "A formal cessation of hostilities between the Vorthak Empire and humanity," Zekthu replied without hesitation. "Your species has demonstrated capabilities that intrigue us far more than simple conquest would satisfy. We would prefer to study you rather than destroy you." Rodriguez felt a moment of dizzy relief. They had done it. One experimental ship with an untested technology had convinced the galaxy's greatest military power to reconsider its approach to humanity. But she knew this was just the beginning. "We accept your proposal, Admiral," she said. "But understand that humanity will continue to develop and deploy new technologies. We will continue to explore possibilities that others consider impossible." "We would expect nothing less," Zekthu replied, and Rodriguez could hear approval in his voice. "Perhaps in time, our species might find ways to cooperate rather than simply coexist." 3 months later, Captain Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Prometheus station, watching human and Vorthak engineers work together to understand the principles of controlled reality manipulation. The technology that had saved humanity was now being shared and improved through cooperation with former enemies. Dr. Webb approached, carrying a data tablet filled with theoretical frameworks that would have been considered insane just 6 months earlier. "Captain, the Joint Research Team has made a breakthrough. We think we can create stable dimensional pockets large enough for entire colonies, worlds where the laws of physics can be adjusted for optimal human habitation." Rodriguez nodded, watching a group of young human scientists explain quantum cascade theory to fascinated Vorthak scholars. The galaxy was changing, expanding to accommodate possibilities that no one had imagined before humanity decided to rewrite the rules. "Dr. Webb," she said, "what's our next project?" Webb grinned with the wild enthusiasm of a scientist who had learned that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had dared to hope. "Well, Captain, there's this theoretical framework suggesting we might be able to create pocket dimensions where time flows backward. The applications for historical research alone would be—" Rodriguez laughed, feeling the familiar thrill of human curiosity pushing against the boundaries of the possible. Humanity had survived its first encounter with galactic powers not through superior firepower or brilliant strategy, but by refusing to accept that survival was impossible. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it had never encountered anything quite like human imagination guided by human determination. And as Captain Rodriguez watched the joint research teams pushing the boundaries of reality itself, she knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's journey among the stars. The universe, it turned out, was much more flexible than anyone had realized. It just needed the right species to show it how to bend.